Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. From First Paw Media, sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company, this is the Dog Driver Show. Visit our website at dogworksradio.com. Now here are your hosts, Robert Forto and Kurosh Parto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert and I'm here with my co-host KP and we are the Dog Driver Show, and today we have a couple calling in from Seward, Alaska. KP, who do we have?
Today we have great friends of mine. I know both of them for over 20 years. Dori and Daryl Hollingsworth from Alaska, homegrown champions of our state. And they had a formidable, phenomenal kennel. They're both retired for a little bit now, but they're still extremely involved in the sled dog sport. Guys, thank you so much for being on this interview with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started in the sport.
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting. We started in the late 80s, and I asked my husband Daryl to make a dog sled so that the kids could run in the one-dog sled races that we had here in Seward at the time. So he made a sled, but then he started taking it out with our golden retriever. And then for his birthday, well, actually, we would go around town and we'd pick up all the neighbors' dogs. And so we would have 5 dogs, and none of them belonged to us. And we would take this sled out for a ride. I finally bought him a real sled dog from Dan Seavey for his birthday. And from there, we got better and better dogs until we got pretty serious about what we were doing.
So you guys, as far as I remember, you always had a smaller kennel, and you raced in limited classes. And how was that going back in the 80s or 90s in Seward? You had a circuit down there?
We actually, the only thing we had in Seward was a one-dog race for the kids. But the peninsula had a races in Soldotna, and every once in a while we'd have like a 3-dog race at Summit Lake.
And otherwise you had to come to Anchorage or Big Lake or Montana Creek on those races, right?
That's correct. We did a lot of driving.
So how did you become more and more competitive? Obviously, I know you guys. You had both Daryl's team, your team. They were super strong, 8-dog or 10-dog or 6-dog. How did all of that get evolved? Was it because of the kids? Because of yourself? How did that happen?
Well, we bought 2 dogs from Bill Sullivan and Dick Tozier, and we bred those 2 dogs, and we got a litter of pups. And it was interesting because when they turned a year old, I told Daryl, I said, I'll take the yearlings because I don't want to go fast. I just want to, go mosey around the trail. But those dogs turned out to be so fast, and I gave them to Daryl to run one time, and he said, you have a better team than I do. And those dogs with a little leader named Mitzi went on to win races for the next 7 years, set track records for all 7 of those years. Pretty much taught us what a good team looked like.
And then I recall at one point you guys started to experiment with the hounds, from the Alaskan Huskies going to the hounds. When was that, and how did you organize that?
That's interesting also, because we did not go around about that in the way that I would suggest to people. But when Ego came over, of course, he had those hounds, and he bred to the German short hairs. So I decided that I should get a German short hair. So I did. I bought Nestle, and then a couple months later, I bought a male named Chip. And Chip turned out to be like this phenomenal sled dog. And with him in lead at less than 2 years old, is when we won the World Championships, the IFSS World Championship. So he was pretty phenomenal, and considering I bought him out of the classified ads for $400, he did far more than I would have expected.
So did you then after that, did you breed him into your Alaskans to create the new generation of the dogs you had?
I did breed him. I bred him to Mitzi's sister, Roxy, and we got pups out of them. They were all good, but none of them were as good as him. I think you really have to go down another generation before you do that. But you talked about us having a smaller kennel, and we found that by breeding our own dogs, we had a lot of dogs in the yard that were not raceable, about half the yard. And we wanted to be able to race all our dogs. So that's when we started actually buying dogs. And we found that we could keep our kennels small by buying dogs.
And then is that how Daryl started to experiment some of the open class racing too?
I think we just kind of evolved into that. We did it even before we were buying the dogs. We actually bought dogs at the beginning, but we found the dogs we were buying were not very personable. We could have them for years and we still couldn't turn them loose. And then as people began to free drop and spend more time with their puppies, we found that we could buy dogs again and have dogs that would adjust to us and we could have fun with them. But even before that, the dogs, the open class just kind of evolved because they're like running larger teams.
And this question is for Daryl, actually. Daryl, how did you organize going from 8-dog class and 10-dog class to the open races? And were you targeting at any point Rendezvous and ONAC?
Well, we usually did the preliminary open class races, which, kept us within a, 10, 12, 16 mile race. We did one year try to shoot for Rondi. We had 12 dogs we were working with, and we found out that some of the dogs weren't capable. We started losing some of our dogs as the mileage got longer, and we just didn't have the depth in our kennel to get that extra mileage we needed for the longer races. So I stuck primarily with the preliminary open class races, 16 or less miles. And then Dori would take the same team later in the season and run the 8 and 10 dog class, and those dogs were primed for the late season 8 and 10 dog races. The mileage was about the same for those as that preliminary open class.
So you guys, when you used to do the circuit, which one of the races was your favorite for both of you guys?
Well, doing the preliminary open class, I like to do the Montana Creek races. Those were usually earlier in the season. Then we hit the Chugiak track and do the preliminaries there. And if it was a season where the Eagle River Classic was not too long, I'd run the Classic. And then after all the Chugiak season was over, we'd hit the Anchorage races and do some of those. And then by then, Dori was starting to run the 8 and 10 dog, and we'd maybe end up in Fairbanks and Toke and some of those later season races to run the 8 and 10 dog class.
Any of you guys did ever some of the village races at the end of the season?
Those were actually our favorites. And one of the most exciting ones we ever did was getting to Tanana, back when you had to take snow machines out there. And that was a really fun and exciting, just the trip itself was fun.
I still remember the pictures of the snow machine and the dogs in the little boxes behind the snow machine. That was before the road it was, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We'd go out as a caravan, all these dog teams, with snow machines with a trailer behind it. And then after the Tanana race, we went to Minto, and Dori ran the women's open class and won that. And then I ran with the same dog team the men's open class, and I won that. And everybody in Minto thought that was just fantastic that we used the same team back to back on the women's and the men's race. That was a lot of fun.
Let's go backtrack on that, because I said I always say that a lot of our listeners, they are not dog drivers, actually. They're like regular people. They just enjoy listening to our stories. Tell me about how you organized to go to Tanana. And Tanana, Alaska, for our listeners, it's a remote Alaskan village on Tanana River. And there was no road to it. So how do you guys organize to take a dog team to race there?
Well, I had to build a dog hauler for the snow machine, and it was just plywood with different compartments in it. Some of the dog haulers were just one great big open box that they chain the dogs up on the inside and haul them out there. But my dogs all had the comfort of being 2 dogs to a box, had their own little compartment in there. And then we hooked that up to the snow machine, and Dori and I rode the machine and pulled the dogs behind us, had the sled strapped on, all of our gear, dog food, everything. And, we went out there with Eddie Dayton and Todd Shallett. Yeah, those were our travel companions going out. It was a lot of fun. Those guys were a hoot. And then we went up to it's actually on the Yukon River where we went, and stayed with people. People opened their homes, and it was a lot of fun. Every night they had a big party with a band, and
So where would you leave the truck and the trailers and hit the snow with the snow machine?
Well, we drove up to Manly and spent the night at Joey Reddington's house. He let us stay there, and then we just parked. Most of the guys parked their vehicles there at Joey's, and then unloaded the machine, hit the trail.
And how long would it take you to go there?
It was an all-day event.
Like 8 hours of snow machining or 10 hours? How far?
Well, it shouldn't have taken as long as it did, but one of the snow machiners, his dog box fell in a crack, and it took the track off the snow machine, and we had to put the track back on and get the box back out of the crack. And so actually Linda Johnson, who drove her dog team out there, made it to Manly, or made it to Tanana ahead of us. Coming back, it took maybe 6 hours.
Yeah, but people getting stuck.
Yeah, they were getting stuck, and it had snowed, and the river was glare ice underneath it. You'd get off to try and push your snow machine, and you just fall down. It was so. If everything went right, it would probably not take that long. But it's about 70 miles. But it took us quite a while.
You know, when we got stuck on the creek there, when the dog box got stuck in that crevice, and it just stopped the machine. Just stopped it immediately. Who was that? Was that Todd? That was Eddie. Yeah, okay, Eddie Dayton. Eddie's not a little guy, he's a big guy. And that machine just stopped immediately, and he went flying in the air. It was awesome. I was behind him. He was flying in the air, and his machine went up in the air and kind of did a flip-flop and came crashing back down. It was pretty intense.
Those are the adventures of the dog driving in Alaska, right?
Those are the things we remember.
I love the stories. Guys, you stopped racing a few years ago. And when was your last race? And how difficult was to stop this super competitive team racing that you had?
So the last year that we raced was 2012, and we had a lot of snow that year. And I won the ISRA gold medal for the 10 dog that year. So the dogs were pretty much on their peak. And they were young. They were aged 2 to 4. And our last race would have been Tote, which is always kind of a letdown for us. That the dogs are at the end of the season. They never quite perform, like they were. And we're fine with that. It's just kind of a fun time to go to. But when we came home, we looked at the dogs and we looked at all that snow. Really, the final decision for us to stop racing was we were just tired of driving through snowstorms every weekend. But we looked at the dogs and we said, do we want to wait for the dogs to get old and get out of it, or do we want to sell them or do we want to get out while we're on the top of our game? And we decided that getting out while we were on the top sounded like a better idea. So we sold all the dogs to one person, and what was really neat about it was that the next year, 8 of those 10 dogs that we sold ended up running the Fur Rendezvous. And that, to us, was just really exhilarating.
That is fantastic. You are still both very involved in the sled dog community. I see you guys all the time timing, volunteering, which is fantastic. It's like a bug. When you catch it, you cannot get rid of it. One thing that I want to actually, we never talk about that during our interviews, is Daryl is a phenomenal craftsman. He makes some of the best dog trucks, actually dog boxes. How did you get into that, Daryl?
Oh, I was into that in high school. I was the top of my class in wood shop, and I was kind of a teacher's pet in my wood class. And I've always been fascinated with working with wood, and so it's just kind of in my blood.
And I've seen some of the boxes you've built, and they're beautifully put together. And what is the most important for you when you're putting a dog box together for the comfort and the practicality of the box?
For the dogs?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, have enough room. You'd be surprised though. They don't need an extreme amount of room. We usually put 2 dogs to a box so they could keep each other warm. And air circulation seems to be nice because, they're in there breathing and humidity, and sometimes they'll have an accident and pee in their box or something. And you want a little bit of air circulation in there. So I always use pegboard for the inner walls. And that helped the air to circulate a little bit better in there. And, of course, they had screens on the outside. But, I always used good quality MDO plywood. It's a really smooth paper overlay, and when I use a car paint on it, it looks just professional. The looks are important to me. I want it to look nice as far as functioning.
Also,
but,
what are
quality?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just good quality materials. That makes epoxy glues. Stainless steel, everything stainless steel as far as the metal.
What size are the boxes that you, not the whole box, but each dog box?
Each box was 18 inches wide and 39 inches deep. And then I had a 24 inches high.
Okay, and I'm asking these questions because a lot of people you see on social media, they're always reaching out to try to find out how to build a dog box and what is the ultimate dog box. And so that's important for people to listen to this information, these dimensions, because I've seen it so often, those questions hitting. What about the doors? How big of a door or how small of a door you had?
Oh, the door was probably about 8 inches by 10 inches, around there, for a door opening. Didn't take much of a hole for the dog. You don't want it too big though, because you don't want it drafty in there from the outside. Like I said, air circulation's good, but if you're going down the highway and it's 50 below, you don't want your dogs freeze to death.
Definitely. What about lighting? Did you have any lighting on your box?
Outside lighting, yeah. We had when we dropped the dogs in the dark. You had to have lights, either that or wear a headlamp. But we had lights mounted on the vehicle, and I just flip them on and plenty of light. And another thing that we did later in the season is we started adding insulation to the top of the box, and that helped keep the heat in, especially when you're traveling up Fairbanks. You were just up here this last weekend. Froze to death, huh?
Yeah, it was extremely cold. It was 37 below, and it was not good. It was not good. We turned around. Definitely. So let me ask you something else. You mentioned you sold the dog team when they were on their prime, and they did the rendezvous. How was the training different, do you think, for the dogs when you trained them on limited, and for the person who took the same dogs and he trained them differently for rendezvous?
Well, I think that we had already trained those dogs to some extent for Rondi. We'd put miles on them. All of those dogs had run at least 22 miles. So it wasn't like they had never seen the distance before. We just didn't have the depth. So when you put them in another kennel that had more dogs, they were able to fill that out.
Oh, okay, okay. I get that. I get that. And the training at home, did you? How big was the kennel that you had? And did you train straight from the yard, or you had to truck him?
No, we had to truck, but we were able to go out to Exit Glacier a good portion of the time, which is about 5 miles from here. But what we would do was, because we wanted to drive the dogs in the daylight, and Daryl works during the daylight, so I would load all the dogs and the snow machine and sleds, and I would go to Daryl's work at lunchtime. I would pick him up. We would go out and run the dogs to Exit Glacier. We could get up to 18 miles out at Exit Glacier if we did a few loops. And then I would take him back to work, drop him off, and then bring the dogs home and put them all away and feed them.
Yeah, all the stuff that we have to do to get a dog team ready, right?
Correct. And, there were times that we didn't have snow here. It was all ice, or there wasn't snow. And those times we would truck the dogs. I mean, we would just get in the car. We'd drive to Sterling. We'd drive to Montana Creek. We'd just drive someplace and find snow.
Daryl, I have a couple of questions for you. I'm looking at your Facebook page right now as you're talking, and I see that you're a musician. It looks like a bassist, and I'm looking at one of the photos with a really fancy, curly bass. Did you make that?
Yeah, I make bass guitars.
Wow, I think I might have to reach out to you. That thing is beautiful. What a work of craftsmanship. Let's talk a little bit about that, because it seems to me over the last few episodes a heck of a lot of mushers are musicians, or vice versa. What type of music do you play, and does that technical experience that you have being a musician in any way transfer to your life as a dog driver?
Well, I don't know if there's a direct connection there to a dog driver, but yeah, I studied music in college and studied classical and jazz. And of course, here in Seward, Alaska, there's not much outlet for classical and jazz. And I play about anything. I'm in a ukulele band right now. We're just playing old-timey stuff. I do have a jazz band, but the COVID restrictions have kind of shut things down as far as live music performance, not too much of that. But yeah, I like that. I play bass in church every Sunday. We like to get down with music there.
Wow. Yeah, I'm going to share this photo of your bass on your show notes page for sure. Guys, I have one final question for you. It's the question we ask all of our guests, and I would like to hear both of your answers if we could. And I know that you've been involved with the sport for a long time. You had mentioned the late 80s. Let's go with Dori first, and that is, if a person's just getting involved in the sport and they are looking for a piece of advice, just one piece of advice, what would you tell them?
Buy the best dogs you can possibly afford.
Okay, very good. And how about you, Daryl?
Well, it's nice to have a mentor. We had Bill Sullivan. He was our mentor when we got started, and he told us so many good things that, we could have made mistakes and learned from our mistakes, but he just told us how to do it, and we did it, and we did well.
Very good. KP, finishes up here.
No, guys, I wanted to thank both of you guys for being on this show. You're great friends. And I said we know each other for over 20-some years and raced together for so many races. And it's always a pleasure to see you guys at the dog tracks, volunteering and helping the organization and the RGO. Good luck to you guys with all the hunting adventures. I follow you guys up with your pups bird hunting, and hope to see you guys in Fairbanks.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of our guest today and my co-host KP, this is Robert for the Dog Driver. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From First Paw Media, this is the Dog Driver Show. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you can see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Robert Forto and Parto. Our producer is Robert Forto and created for First Paw Media.